Shabbat Shalom, giving all praises to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua Bashem Kadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, the GMS, the rule and teach world inscription. Salutations to the Akim that are doing this work in truth and faith and in all sincerity. Today's lesson is going to be about the upcoming dangers of Babylon the Great. As far as the MOT to the B, the calamities that not only Babylon will be facing, but the whole world be facing these calamities because pieces of the world's delicate economy is being brought to shambles. So what we have here is we have, like the title says, energy bills for a typical household rise from April. Business live. Now people can hardly afford to pay their bills now. What's going to happen when the wicked increases the bills, i.e. Esau Edom? It's going to come to a level where Esau Edom is not going to be able to control what he's doing. Okay? Everything going to spiral all out of control because Esau Edom thinks he's a god. Esau Edom think has control over the resources, over this, over that. But Esau Edom doesn't know that Esau Edom is being played by the Most High, by our big brother, Yahweh, Yahweh Shai. And I digress. I'll let this play a little bit. Lord willing, I can come through with a few scriptures, and Lord willing, the elect can be edified.
Let's look at, or if we can, at the bigger pictures, if you don't mind, which is that many people, and I interviewed Pat McFadden from the cabinet a little earlier, saying this also has to be part of an industrial strategy, that Britain needs to get this investment right, not just in its armed forces, but also in its defence industries too.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be a look at how we do procurement at the same time. I mean, the current picture is effectively defence primes, so our publicly listed defence companies who've always been a safe haven for investors, as defence has always maintained a fairly consistent level of spending within certain percentage points. At the same time, we're going to see a shift away from the kind of tanks, planes, all the sort of good heavy equipment, long 10-year programs for procurement, to technologies that are relevant today and need to be bought today, but equally may be out of date within 18 months' time and in need of renewal. So in a department that has an annualised budget, that's a very difficult thing to do, to keep up with emerging technologies and countering emerging threats at the pace of those threats.
Yeah, fascinating. As you were talking about tanks there, we were showing some tanks on screen, and as you say, that is in many ways a traditional form of fighting, but we've seen that on the battlefield in Ukraine, haven't we, in recent years? When you talk about future defence equipment, what are we talking about? Drones, clearly, for example. What potentially else would some of this money be spent on?
I think it's worth framing it as if we get to the battlefield, we're already slightly too late. Things have gone drastically wrong. We're looking very much at defence in its most traditional form, where in its preventative state. So that's going to be things like hardened cybersecurity, greater use of AI for decision making, and also processing capabilities on that side of things. Quantum is yet to play a large part, but largely will do. And these are technologies being driven by the private sector, and we're going to increasingly see a lot of private sector technologies moving into the defence space, who didn't necessarily intend to set themselves up as defence suppliers.
Edward, I suppose what I've been trying to get my head around this afternoon is that we spent the last couple of years talking about how, and we are primarily talking about Russia, I think, when it comes to the threat, at least to the UK, has seen its defence capabilities massively degraded over the last 3 years. Is it capable? Is Russia capable of taking on the UK, taking on other European countries, given its current state?
I think it's capable of tying up a lot of our resources and a lot of our time and draining us of our treasure. I mean, when we set up MD1 as a fund, we were the first European Defence and National Security Fund at a time that was deeply unfashionable. This threat hadn't emerged. While the militaristic threat of someone like Russia has always existed, really a lot of our eyes are on things like the threat from China and its access to our data and a lot of our civilian infrastructure and that side of things. So it's a very nuanced battlefield or picture that we look at the moment.
What's your credit card debt balance? If it's $10,000 or more, here are 3 easy solutions you can start implementing today. And number 3 is an absolute game changer. Number 1, the first step to tackling your credit card debt is understanding how much debt you actually have and how long it could follow you around for if you're only making minimum payments or have fallen behind. Minimum payments could literally keep you in debt for decades. $10,000 in debt can take anywhere from 14 to 26 years to pay off if you're only paying the minimums. And that's just $10,000. I know many of us have a lot more than that. Number 2, try this popular method to tackle debt. Start with minimum payments to stay current on all your cards. Then take any additional money you can afford and put all of it towards your smallest debt until it's paid off. By paying off your smallest debt first, you'll likely eliminate the most interest in the shortest amount of time. Then work your way up, knocking out one debt at a time until you're debt-free. Number 3, and this one is a game changer. Anyone with $10,000 or more in credit card debt or personal loans may qualify for help from National Debt Relief. Getting started is easy, and the process has already helped over 500,000 people and counting.
I was on the computer working on something. What caught my eye was a little shield, red, white, and blue shield, and it said National Debt Relief. And I called.
Slovakia.
Okay, Edward, fascinating stuff, and clearly an issue we are going to be returning to a lot, not least of all with that meeting with Keir Starmer and President Trump a little later on this week. Thank you very much indeed. That's Edward Edburn there. Thank you. And just to let you know, we are going to be taking the Prime Minister's press conference on this live from Downing Street at 5 p.m. So within the next 30 minutes or so here on Sky News. Let's move on though, because the Tesla owner, Elon Musk, has been a busy man in recent weeks, slashing federal spending in the US and using his X platform to try and influence politics in Europe. Is it then a surprise that Tesla sales have seen a big drop, particularly in Europe, as well as the growing competition from China? It appears that his political actions may have led to some people deciding they don't really want his cars. In January, Tesla sold 9,945 vehicles in Europe. That's down 45% from the 18,161 sold last year. And according to the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, Tesla's share of the European market fell from 1.8% to 1%. Well, let's speak to Dan Ives, Global Head of Technology Research at Wedbush Securities. Dan, always a pleasure. First question, it's very clear, isn't it? Is there a connection?
Look, I mean, it's not pretty, right? I mean, in terms of Europe sales for Tesla, it's been a struggle for the last year, but I think about 10 to 15% of the decline is probably brand issues related to Musk. In terms of the Doge, the Trump, I think some of the sort of circus show a bit that we've seen, it's had a negative impact. I think in Europe more than any other place, including the US.
In saying that, some people have also said Tesla effectively have dropped the ball a little bit, if you like, and frankly the cars aren't quite as cutting edge as they were 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I disagree with that. Look, I think when it comes to electric vehicles, Tesla continues to be the gold standard from a brand perspective. Look, Chinese players, BYD and others, I mean, they've had phenomenal vehicles. Competition continues to increase. But it comes down to you either want a Tesla or you don't. I think the issue is that you're starting to see much more of an anti-Musk sort of fever take place in Europe, and I think these numbers speak to it. But it's our view, autonomous is the future, and that continues to be much more positives from Trump administration, despite some of the negatives here.
And just finally on this, Dan, you've been covering this sector for a long time. How much do you think kind of consumer thought process or sentiments about individuals or brands matters when it comes to what they buy? Or is it people just want a good product at a reasonable price and that's what really matters?
Look, I think usually that's what matters. I think Tesla's unique because when you buy a Tesla, it's synonymous with Musk. And it's part of, whether it's a modern day Albert Einstein or, and obviously others would strongly disagree, but you're buying the best engineering vehicle out there. You are, the brand of Musk is very associated with Tesla. And that's why what we've seen in terms of Doge, it's definitely had a negative impact, especially in Europe. And obviously throwing his hand in with the elections and a lot of the other issues in Germany, it's had a negative impact.
Well, let's talk about another big US company that seems to have got the Trump memo, if you like, and that is Apple, an unseen, a massive $500 billion, $500 billion in the United States, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Is this purely because President Trump is back in the White House?
I mean, look, Cook and Trump, there's a strong relationship there. You go back to Trump 1, right? When Biden, Cook was really a background noise. But this $500 billion too, look, it's a doubling down in terms of U.S. investments. We saw Stargate and others. But there's a little Hallmark card in there too, right? Like when the China tariffs come, make sure Apple, is not one that's impacted, right? So there's always... Cook's 10% politician, 90% CEO.
Okay, and finally, let's talk about NVIDIA. We're getting their results tomorrow. It's fair to say it's been a pretty roller coaster ride, hasn't it, for tech shares over the last couple of months. And frankly, given how fragile and volatile the tech industry is, particularly with investment in AI, you'd have to say that volatility...
This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 48. Therefore, thou shalt serve thine enemies, which the Lord send against thee, in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. So, we're still dealing with this proverbial yoke of iron, okay? It's not physical. It's more so systematic and economic. But the Lord's got a trick for Esau's ass.
He is only likely to continue.
Look, the godfather of AI, Jensen NVIDIA, that's what not just the street around the globe will be watching, but it's volatile, and Trump's added to that. But this AI revolution, I think, is just starting in terms of this, this $2 trillion AI capex, but it all starts with NVIDIA. When they talk, everyone listens. We expect great things tomorrow night. That should calm some nerves in what's a white knuckle period for tech stocks.
If you are a smoker, you can now join a clinical trial and earn up to $6,000. You'll receive a free medical exam, lab reports, and exclusive access to advanced medication.
Lucky.
Okay, Dan, thank you very much indeed. And one day we'll also have to find out where you buy your shirts from, because it is always a colourful, I think, contribution from you on this program. Dan,
and we'll do that in a separate program. Exactly.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Dan House there. 3 years on from the invasion of Ukraine, and Europe still remains dependent on Russian gas. And there is one more product that we also have come to rely on. That is Russian fertilizer. The UK has banned imports from Moscow, but the story is still very different elsewhere in Europe, as our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, explains.
How would you feel if I told you there was a critical ingredient that we're now more reliant on Russia for than we were before the invasion. When I say we, I mean Europe in general. Look at this though, okay? Start with a bit of good news. This is wholesale gas prices. These, by the way, are not the prices we pay at home. The prices we pay at home are going up because of the price cap. But actually, the wholesale gas price has just started to come down quite a lot, 22% in the past fortnight. It might mean that bills might be more cheap in the future. But why is that happening? It's because people are looking at what's happening, thinking of potential peace talks and thinking that might push gas prices down because you've got more gas potentially going into Europe. And there hasn't been enough gas.
Now you have to understand what's being explained here is a downshifting of the market. Okay? So it's causing a rift in the economy. This is Lamentations, chapter 4, verse 9. And it reads, "They that be slain with the sword are better than they that be slain with hunger. For these pine away stricken, thorough for the want of fruits of the field." And so with this being said, the prices are going up in goods and services. And so since the whole US of A is strictly built upon goods and services, this place is going to be what I believe, and I speak as a man, Yahweh Ratazar willing, this place crumbles first before the rest of the world crumbles.
In Europe in recent months, and that's partly because there is not as much gas coming from Russia. This is showing you just the proportion of European gas, so EU gas coming from Russia. It used to be above 50%. It's come down an awful lot. Worth saying, if you include liquefied natural gas, it doesn't look like quite so much of a fall. But even so, less gas in Europe from Russia. And that's a bit of an issue, because if you look at all of the different kind of uses that gas plays in the economy in Europe, well, it's quite a lot of stuff. You know, it's transport, but it's also residential. So all those homes, it's heating the homes, it's going into power stations, but also it's going into industry. Okay, so it's getting the factories working, it's producing chemicals, and when it comes to chemicals, one of the most important chemicals is fertilizer. And most nitrogen fertilizer is made from gas. It's a fossil fuel product. But because that gas is so expensive, not as much of it is being made in Europe, raising the question, where does it come from? Well, in the past, a lot of it came from Russia. And just look at what's happened with our European dependence on fertilizer from Russia. That has come down a bit, but whereas iron and steel is much lower than it was before, fertilizer, it's actually relatively high. And if we look not just at the share, but at the total amount, have a look at this chart, okay? So this is the total amount of nitrogen fertilizer, the most important type of fertilizer, coming from Russia, just in volume terms. And compare these two areas. So back 2018-19, best period to compare things to, because obviously that was the pandemic then. 2018-19, over that period, 4.6 million tons. Now look at the last 2 years, 4.9 million tons. So Europe is importing more fertilizer now from Russia than it was before the invasion. It's kind of striking, isn't it? And actually, if you look at where fertilizer, all types of fertilizer come from into Europe, it's pretty clear, isn't it? It's Russia. That was before the invasion. Now look, after the invasion, does anything change? Does the red bar change? Actually, the red bar goes up a bit. Really striking, isn't it? Worth saying, though, there is one country which doesn't have quite the same issue. It's the UK, because we banned the import of Russian and Belarusian fertilizer. So that's gone down basically to zero. And where's our fertilizer coming from? It's coming from the United States instead. But across Europe as a whole, that dependence on Russian fertilizer is actually going up, not down.
Ed Conway there. Well, on a very different note, it must be said, Kensington Palace have tweeted out this picture, and that is, of course, Prince William meeting Thomas Tuchel, who is the new England manager, with the words, "Great to meet the new England manager, Thomas Tuchel, for the first time today and hear about plans for the team." Of course, Prince William is president of the Football Association, has been for some 20 years, and there he is welcoming the new England manager, Thomas Tuchel, with that picture today for the first time, and clearly hearing about plans that the manager has for the England team. Okay, you're watching This Is Life.
Now, those that are not pleasing to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, those Israelites, okay, first and foremost starting with Israel, then the other nations, but those of Israel that are not pleasing to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, this is what's going to happen, okay? And you got to remember, it's all about the elect. The whole world is going to feel this crunch. Save the elect. Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep. Woe unto you when men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. Okay, and the more and more is making it evident that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is making things more evident who the men of the Lord are and who the men of the Lord aren't. I digress.
Here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be looking at how the markets are doing on this Tuesday. The FTSE up just a fraction. All the details after this break. Stay tuned.
Have you dreamed of getting your pilot license soaring through the sky? Introducing Private Pilot Made Easy, your launch pad.
The town famous for a fake grooming scandal. I did not leave the house for about 3 years. Had a secret that
Salakia. Well, I guess that wraps it up. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Giving our praises to Yahweh Hashem Yahushua Ba'Shem Rakakadash. And until next time, Shalom.